case he decides that I need to walk the babies around. No, just in case, your arm gets tired or something because they're getting so big. I mean, I'm just saying. They start fighting. I got all this space. I can roam. Perfect. So I'm all ready to go. Our scripture today comes from 1 Samuel. We're going back into the Old Testament. And we're going to be reading from the beginning of 1 Samuel, chapter 1, starting at verse 4. Whenever he sacrificed, Elkanah would give parts of the sacrifice to his wife Peninnah and to all her sons and daughters. But he would give only one part of it to Hannah, though he loved her, because the Lord had kept her from conceiving. And because the Lord had kept Hannah from conceiving, her rival would make fun of her mercilessly, just to bother her. So that is what took place year after year. Whenever Hannah went to the Lord's house, Peninnah would make fun of her. Then she would cry and wouldn't eat anything. Hannah, why are you crying? Her husband, Elkanah, would say to her. Why won't you eat? Why are you so sad? Aren't I worth more to you than 10 sons? One time after eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah got up and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli, the priest, was sitting in the chair by the doorpost of the Lord's temple. Hannah was very upset and couldn't stop crying as she prayed to the Lord. Then she made this promise. Lord of heavenly forces, just look at your servant's pain and remember me. Don't forget your servant. Give her a boy. Then I'll give him to the Lord for his entire life. No razor will ever touch his head. As she kept praying before the Lord, Eli watched her mouth. Now Hannah was praying in her heart. Her lips were not moving. Her voice was silent. So Eli thought she was drunk. How long will you act like a drunk? So broke, Eli told her. No, sir, Hannah replied. I'm just a very sad woman. I haven't any wine or beer, but have been pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think your servant is some good-for-nothing woman. This whole time I've been praying out of my great worry and trouble. Eli responded, then go in peace, and may the God of Israel give you what you've asked from him. Please think well of me, your servant, Hannah said. Then the woman went on her way, ate some food, and wasn't sad any longer. They got up early the next morning and worshipped the Lord. Then they went back home to Ramah. Elkanah slept with his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah conceived and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, which means I asked the Lord for him. This is the word of God for the people of all the world. Praise God. Amen. This is the beginning of the books of Samuel. This is how Samuel came to be. Samuel, if you remember, was the one who grew to anoint Saul and then anoint David as king. And what a perfect time of the year to talk about Samuel. As we'll remember in just a couple weeks, the line of David, of Jesse's branch, which led to the birth of Jesus. And so it's important that we look at Samuel. We begin at, well, I guess not the beginning, but the beginning of Samuel and Hannah. We don't often talk about it. Last week, after giving our commitments 2 weeks ago, we said, well, now what? Now what? What's next? And so I have been watching a lot of little kid shows in my house. Our favorites are Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood and Curious George. We love Curious George. We're not a huge fan of Cat in the Hat, but we do love Curious George, Dave the Tiger's Neighborhood. Oh, and this little show called Super Y, which is great fun. It's all about reading. But it's really funny because I feel like in every little kid's show, the narrator loves to ask all of these questions. Like, for example, in Super Y, they'll put up, all the letters of the alphabet, and they'll say, now where's the L? We need to find the L, right? And you're like, there, right? And you can hear them in the background in the little kid show, right? You're all there?
We're all there.
Okay, sweet. At least this part of the room is there. And there's that part where we're like, yeah, we're there. There's also that part where they'll be like, now what should we do? Right? And everything kind of stops and it's really silent for a second. And in my head, I'm going, just pick up the ball! Just pick up the ball! That's what's next! You have to pick up the ball, right? We were watching Super Y this week, and they were learning to play baseball. And he was frustrated that he couldn't hit the ball. And so, in great, dramatic little kid show fashion, well, what should we do? Practice! Yes! We should practice, right? So I feel like sometimes we sit in that little kid show silence, right? What should we do next? Silence. And we have to decide in that silence who we're going to listen to. Are we going to listen to God? Or are we going to listen to the world? What should we do next? And so here we find Hannah at the beginning of 1 Samuel. And this amazing thing has happened to Hannah. She had been praying to conceive a child. Her husband even went and got married to someone else named Peninnah, who had many children, and Hannah still did not have any. And she'd been praying and praying and praying, and she was you could feel the lament from Hannah. And she goes to the temple and she prays once more and she says, God, I am so sad. If you will bear me a son, I will give him to you. She says, not a razor won't touch his head. In other words, I will present him to you and he will be for the temple. Please, Lord. Please. She wasn't speaking out loud. But Eli, who was at the temple, noticed her. He was another priest. And he noticed her praying. And Eli intercedes on her behalf as well. And her prayers end up answered. She goes home and she conceives a child, and the child she names Samuel. Hannah is granted the prayer that she has always wanted. And it was on God's time. And it was through God's will. For this was a great prophecy that had been conceived. This was the one who would anoint David, so that the line would continue. This was part of God's great arc of God's story. The great arc of the Bible. The great arc of how God has been revealed to us through history. And therefore how we understand God today. And so what should she do next? I feel this great silence. What if you were Hannah and you had just been granted this prayer? What would you do next? Well, here's what she does. Just a few verses later, it's 1 Samuel chapter 2. Then Hannah prayed. My heart rejoices in the Lord. My strength rises up in the Lord. My mocks my enemies because I rejoice in your deliverance. No one is holy like the Lord. No, no one except you. There is no rock like our God. Don't go on and on talking so proudly, spouting arrogance from your mouth, because the Lord is the God who knows, and he weighs every act. The bows of mighty warriors are shattered, but those who were stumbling now dress themselves in power. Those who were filled full now sell themselves for bread, but the ones who were starving are now fat from food. The woman who was barren has birthed 7 children, but the mother with many sons has lost them. The Lord, he brings death, gives life, takes down to the grave and raises up. The Lord, he makes poor, gives wealth, brings low, but also lifts up high. God raises the poor from the dust, lifts up the needy from the garbage pile. God sits them with officials, gives them the seat of honor. The pillars of the earth belong to the Lord. He sets the world on top of them. God guards the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked die in darkness because no one succeeds by strength alone. The Lord, his enemies are terrified. God thunders against them from heaven. The Lord, he judges the far corners of the earth. May God give strength to his king and raise high the strength of his anointed one. After conceiving a son, after a prayer being answered, after God's will is done, in the great arc of the history of the story, Hannah gives thanks. She prays, and she gives thanks to God. That's what she does. That's why we gather for Thanksgiving every year. To give thanks. Even if only for a short time. I mean, by golly, I pray that we give thanks all year round. But Thanksgiving is a wonderful time to perhaps place our priorities. To give thanks for all that God has done and all that God is doing. See, we gather in church. We gather as a community to give thanks for all that God has done and all that God is doing. Just as Hannah did. And Hannah was not the only woman in the Bible to speak a psalm of praise. Outside the book of Psalms, there are many other psalms and songs, like the song of Miriam, the song of Mary. And we still sing songs of thanks today, as well as songs of lament. In the United States, I thought it was interesting. I looked up what are people most thankful for in the United States? What I thought was interesting is that in New York State, you guys are going to laugh. In New York State, they said an apartment. And I thought, I'm not sure they separated New York City from the rest of New York. Because in New York City, yeah, I'd be very thankful for an apartment, right? Even if it's a closet. So I thought that was really interesting. I said, everybody from upstate New York. I'm like, I don't know. But overall, it also depended on where you lived. For example, the thing that people were most thankful for down in Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, can you guess? Rain! Yes, you're right. Rain was what they were most thankful for. So it kind of depends. Oregon, this one was fun. This one was great. You know what they're most thankful for in Oregon? Yoga. No joke. No joke. Apparently they are most thankful for yoga. I said, that's sweet. That's awesome. But they also said overall, the things that Americans are most thankful for are family and friends. About number 10 on the list was God. And I thought, that's actually not that bad when you consider certain areas of our country that are extremely post-Christian. That God still made the list. I went, yeah! But at the same time, why is God not number 1? Is God number 1 in your lives? the church. I mean God. Is God number one in your life? What else are we thankful for? I'm just going to throw it out there. This is non-rhetorical.
Freedom.
What?
Freedom.
Freedom! I thought you said tornado. And I was like, what? Okay. Freedom! Yes, freedom! It's sometimes really hard to hear up here. The acoustics go that way. They don't always come this way. So it's sometimes hard for me to hear. What else? What are you thankful for?
Good health.
Babies! Good health! That was number 3 on the list. I don't know who said good health, but that's what it was.
Sleep.
Sleep! Thanks be to God. Jasper slept the whole night for the first time in 8 months. It was very exciting. I did not sleep the whole night, but he slept the whole night. What else?
Being with us all the time.
What?
Him being with us all the time.
Yes! God being with us all the time. Absolutely. What else?
Love.
What?
Love.
Love. Yes! Absolutely.
A job.
What?
A job.
A job. Thanks be to God. Yes. Food. Pumpkin pie. Turkey.
Baby.
What?
Baby.
Babies. Yes. We love babies. Oh yeah, my baby. Teresa. That's how you're from. Yes, a roof over. Yeah. And heat. Heat.
Wonderful thing.
Heat.
Grandparents.
Grandparents, yes. Yes. I'm so thankful for the United Methodist Church. I'm thankful for connection. Just today, I was talking with someone who said that a friend of theirs is trying to find an organ teacher down in Florida and can't find an organ teacher. They want to get an organ and find an organ teacher, and they want to learn organ and all this stuff. And I went, really? And they said, yeah, we can't find anything. I said, I got connections in Florida. Where do they live? And so I'll be able, hopefully, to be, and the connection of the United Methodist Church is amazing. Being able to call down to another church or down to another place, where somebody needs the help of the church, and being able to say, hey, can you touch base with this person? What a connection we have. I am so thankful for Pastor Megan Stowe and for her friend Carrie, who spent the last year going and visiting Louise Matthews in St. Albans. If you don't know, she had United Methodist clergy visiting with her often. And it was through a connection of the United Methodist Church. In fact, Megan happened to be my pastor at Shenandoah United Methodist Church when I was growing up. I am so thankful for the 2 hours or so that Kathy and I got to spend with Louise before she passed. Holy, holy space. I'm so thankful for Jasper, and I'm so thankful that he slept through the night. Thank you, Jesus. It was entirely by the grace of God. I'm so thankful that this morning I had a coat to put on my dad. I'm so thankful for firefighters who fight fires all throughout California and across our country and across our world, who give their lives. I'm so thankful I saw a story of, there was a hospital that was about to burn, and a woman had just had a baby, and they said, we're evacuating now, and she grabbed her baby, and off they went. They got into an ambulance, and they couldn't escape the fire. The fire started closing in around them, and there was one house that they were trying to protect. And there were people gathered around the house with hoses, hosing down this one house in this one neighborhood in the midst of a fire-ravaged city. And as the ambulance is literally lighting on fire, they get out and they shelter in this home. And there were several people in this home, and it was the only home that made it in that whole community. But people were saved because others grabbed their hoses. Because somebody flagged down the ambulance and said, come here. There is so much to be thankful for. We don't even realize how much. I'm so thankful for the witness of beautiful people like Louise and Reverend Milton Vahey, who gave their lives for the gospel of Jesus Christ, who shared such love with this church, with our church connection. We are called to be thankful. You know, Hannah had a lot to be sad about. She had a lot of sorrow in her life. But she gave thanks to God for the one thing that she always wanted. And you know what, church? Sometimes those one things are never granted. Not in the way it was to Hannah. But sometimes it's those little things. Those little moments. Those little babies that we give thanks for. For God is doing great things. And we are called to be thankful. And so my question, perhaps my challenge for you this week, as we move into Thanksgiving, into Christmas, Advent, sorry. As we move into Advent, I have to put my pastor hat. As we move into Advent, not Christmas, Advent. What has God done in your life that you haven't thanked God for? What is God doing in your life? What has someone around you done that you have not thanked them for yet? It could have been something that was so small and yet so meaningful. Friends, I hope today that you will thank God, not just for your family and friends, not just for what God is doing for you, but simply for who God is. That God is an everlasting God who is always with us, granting us grace that we don't always deserve. Thanks be to God for a great challenge to love God and to love one another. Amen? Amen. Friends, in response to the word, in response to our prayers this morning,